So hello everybody. This is the August installment 2025 of Textile of the Month Club. Today we'll be talking about hige-tsumugi. The term hige refers to a beard or whiskers, and so the type of fabric we're looking at has whiskers. It has little hairs hanging out. So these um, protrusions basically are the leftover end of thread that has been knotted. Okay. And so when you're knotting two yarns together, you have the knot and you have the little threads hanging out. Normally you clip those off. Okay. But in the case of hige-tsumugi, it's deliberately left there as part of the design element. Now, first of all, let's go into talking about what tsumugi actually is. As I mentioned to those of you I was chatting with a moment ago, we covered tsumugi um, 2, 3 years ago, I think it was. And at that time, we covered Higetsumugi, but we focused on the weaving technique rather than the yarn or the finished product so much. So today we're going to delve a little bit more into tsumugi itself. Tsumugi means twisted or spun, as in spun yarn, and to contrast that to reeled yarn, for example. Okay, so here what you'll see, there's one type of tsumugi called yuki-tsumugi. Yuki-tsumugi is made from the caps of the silk cocoon. So what the weaver will do is take the cocoon itself, soak it in warm water, poke a finger in, and stretch it out to expand all the yarn. Okay, and then as she does so, she'll go ahead and remove the cocoon, the pupa from inside, along with anything else that might be in there, and then stretch it out a bit. This is how you get the silk mawata caps that you can buy. Okay, so she'll go ahead and do that one after another, stretch it out to whatever size. In this particular instance, it doesn't have to be a standard size because the cap itself is not what's being marketed. She's going to be pulling the yarn from this. So you can see it's cleaned up. It's a bit wet. She'll squeeze it out and put it over in the pile and move on to the next one. Okay. Now, once she has a sufficient quantity, by the way, it takes roughly 2,200 cocoons to make one bolt of yardage for a kimono. Okay. So here she's taking that mawata cap that she just produced, and she's pulling the threads out and spinning as she goes to create the yarn. Now, this has an inherent portion to the design. It gives a slub because there is some unevenness to it. And that's one of the appeals. Also, because it's not reeled silk, it has a softer, fluffier texture. Once she has that done, once she's woven her kimono, once the fabric is being cut off the loom, then there are threads that are left over at the back of the loom, and those are called thrums. So let's take a look at the thrums. This is the back of the loom, okay? And here the weaver is pulling out his excess. So you can see the bolt has been cut away, and this is what's left that was tied to the back beam. This is normally waste. And of course, nobody wants to waste any of their precious silk yarn, especially if they've spun it themselves. So once she's spun, she has her tsumugi silk. She's going to weave it. She's going to take those thrums. Now that she has the thrums, the next task is to take all of those scrap pieces and tie them together, one after another, to create yet an additional bolt of fabric. And the net result is you wind up, in the case of tsumugi, you have these slubs. Okay, that's not higetsumugi. That's just plain regular tsumugi. Okay. However, when you leave the little hairy parts, the ends of the knots hanging out deliberately, then that becomes higetsumugi. And so here's one of those little things. Now, when you have only one, okay, one or two here or there, that's a weaving flaw. Okay. When it's all over as a pattern as part of the design, then it's higetsumugi. So here are two different bolts of higetsumugi from two different mills. Okay, you can look at the front and the back of them, and you see the little hanging out parts, the little whiskers that give the fabric its name. Okay, and most of these that you're going to find will be darker colors. Quite often they're for men's clothing. Okay, so this gives you a detail. You can see some of the little extra knot ends hanging out here. This just tells you it's Mawata Tsumugi, and Yonezawa is the weave where it's woven. Okay, a few more examples. When you think of reeled silk, so you're taking the yarn from the cocoon and unwinding it, that gives us things like China silk, satins, brocades, these nice shiny silks. Anytime the yarn is spun, you wind up with something a little bit more like a raw silk or um, a softer, fluffier kind of silk that is really very, very strong. Whoops, a daisy. Let's see. Here we go. So let's look at a couple other examples. These are two more bolts from different weaves again. You're going to find a huge variation in how furry your weave is. Okay, it just depends on the taste of the artist and what the client is looking for. Quite often, when it's a bolt for men's clothing, it will be what's called a hiki, and those are counted ipiki ni hiki for one hiki, two hiki. A hiki is enough to sew up a full kimono plus a haori, so it's which is referred to as an ensemble. So a men's ensemble consists again as the haori and the kimono, and one bolt is enough to create both of those for most people. Again, a few more details. Again, these are all men's clothing. Now, the top one you can see is the hige-tsumugi, and you can see all of the little hanging out parts. But let's make sure we're talking about the same thing. The one below is not hige-tsumugi. This is just regular tsumugi. So if we go ahead and take a close-up, you can see that there's a lot of texture. The warp and weft are different colors, which helps to accentuate that. But these little bumpy out parts, that's not a beard. That's just a bump in the weave. Okay, a slight snag, if you want to call it that. So that does not count as hige-tsumugi. That's just straightforward tsumugi. This is hige-tsumugi. You can see the indigo dyed yarn along with the white and then the deeper, darker indigo color. Okay, this a man's obi, a heko obi, a kaku obi, excuse me, it's a kaku obi. And the label on it simply states that it's done with natural dyes. Okay, now a woman's Nagoya obi, this one is painted over the hige-tsumugi. And let me stop it here for just a minute. For those of you who are dyers, you'll notice that the leaves have been painted, hand painted with indigo over the slubs and over the beard. And then, although the fabric starts as white, additional white powder, gohun, is painted to create the flower petals. Okay, so you can tell that that's painted on rather than resisted. I don't know if you can see this on your screens or not, but the shell tends to cake a little bit and clog up the weave. So in the background where there's no shell, you can clearly see every thread. In the area that's white, that tends to get obliterated just a bit. And then on top of all of that, we have some additional white embroidery to add texture. And of course, there's the salmon-colored embroidery at the top as well. Okay, let's take a closer look elsewhere. So you can see all of these bearded whiskers adding to the texture of the entire obi. There are fads around this. Some years, this is more popular. It's kind of been out of popularity for several decades now, but it's coming back in again. I really like it myself. This is a tie-dyed woman's obi. Excuse me. This is a tie-dyed woman's obi. You can see it's all done with natural dyes. And just like the previous obi we saw, the whiskers are quite long and plentiful. Here we have a woman's haori, quite brightly dyed, very complex pattern. You can see we have the haori collar. Now, in the case of a haori, it always folds back away from the center. And then we also have a gusset. Those two details ensure, if you know those two details, you know you have a haori. Okay. And then, of course, we have the tie that keeps the front closed. So let's zoom in a bit and take a look at this. Okay, here you can see it's a moderately loose weave. And let me stop again. The white portion here just as we saw with the obi, is not rice paste resist. This is not blocking out the original white. The entire fabric was dyed this cream color and the shaded blue. And after all of that was done, the white was applied through a stencil using the seashell, or it could be an acrylic medium too, but most likely seashell. And you know that's the case because it blocks out, obliterates the weave underneath. And this one, again, has quite an abundance of the whiskers. And you also see the slubby portion, which is characteristic of tsumugi. Okay, here we have what's called a michiyuki. A michiyuki is different than a haori, although they're worn for the same occasions. Okay, this one is not lined. It's partially lined at the shoulder. It has a pocket, sort of Napoleonic type pocket. The front always closes on a michiyuki, and there is no gusset at the side. But I'd like to point out this fiber in particular. This one technically, let me stop again for a moment. This one technically is not done with thrums. It is tsumugi. It is the hand spun silk. But these little furry parts, the whiskers that you see, are actually old silk fishermen's nets that have been recycled, shredded, and added to the weave as the weaver goes along. It's a little bit less labor intensive than actually tying off all the thrums. The fisherman's net tends to be a little bit harder, a little bit more brittle than tsumugi threads, but it gives a very distinctive look and texture, which is quite appealing. Still counts as hige-tsumugi, okay, whether it's the fisherman's net or the thrums. Okay, and here's another hige-tsumugi. This is a man's haori, a finished piece. You can see this one is quite whiskery. Okay. And you can see even the little bit of lining for the sleeve has the hige-tsumugi. The lining itself is real tie-dye, so that's kanoko shibori. You can see the two loops where the haori himo would go. The cord that closes the haori keeps it closed. And again, because it's a haori, we know that the collar is going to flat back. Now let's stop for a minute there. That's a man's haori. What I want to show you now is a jacket that I made for myself using hige-tsumugi, and I'll show you some of the details involved in it. Okay, so it's sort of a combination of all the Japanese garments that we just talked about. It has more Western style sleeves like a suit jacket. Okay, the collar is not designed, it's not a haori. Okay, you can see pockets at the side. Okay. There is a gusset at the side as well, like a haori. The collar is not designed to lay away from the center. It's designed more like a kimono collar or a hanten collar. Okay. And then this is the kumihimo closure that I made for the piece using Tibetan coral and then silk cord, of course. And then because I wear this jacket when traveling, I have a zipper pocket, like the Michiyuki had a pocket. And then the lining is one that I dyed using katazome and sarasa techniques, hand painting techniques of two kids playing janken, scissor, paper, stone. Okay, and this is indigo dyed, so it does tend to crock a little bit where it gets friction, which is around the back shoulder area. Okay. And as with most men's haori, it has hooks to allow you to attach the cording. And again, just to show you the gusset at the side and the pocket here. Okay, so that gives you some of the details of how the jacket was done. And that's the jacket that I'm wearing now. So I'll stand up in just a moment to try to show it to you. Okay, and this gives you more detailing of the whiskers on it. And okay, that concludes that portion of it. So let me go ahead and stop the share and let me stand up here just a minute to sort of show you how this fits on me at least. Okay. Oh, and the piece in back is the Michiyuki piece that we saw on the slide. So the way this is set up, it has a chanchanko type shoulder to it with a pad in it. It has more Western sleeves to it. It has the pockets at the side. Okay. It has the um, no pocket on that side since I'm right-handed. The pocket is on this side so that I can zip things into it and reach in. So lots of pockets all over so I can find things. The haori himo hangs lower on a man than it does on the woman. And then because it's an ensemble bolt of fabric from which I made this, there's enough to go ahead and make pleated slacks to go with it and also a vest. It's just that it's about 85 degrees in this room right now, so I didn't feel like putting on the vest for you. So I hope you'll excuse me. So that gives you an idea of some of the things that we can do with hige-tsumugi. You can come up with some wonderful designs of yourself. Um, you can always acquire bolts of hige-tsumugi, or you can find beautiful older vintage kimono that you can take apart. Sometimes it might be easier to find them actually rather than the full bolt. So we'll go ahead and sign off, and I'll go ahead and pull in the group members, and we'll continue our discussion. Okay, thank you all for hanging in there with me. Okay.